They will do whatever it takes to win this race. And I think it would be a big mistake if Democrats flinch from that. You know, I don't think that they ought to say, well, we're going to maintain the high moral ground. So they look in Virginia, they could lower the retirement age and they could vacate the Supreme Court. And if I was a representative in Virginia, I would vote for that in a heartbeat. The thing passed. It was the will of the people. It should happen. So, look, I think the Democrats are going to win this election in big numbers. And if you look at Hungary, where Viktor Orban made it almost impossible for the opposition to campaign, limited TV ads, limited where they could put posters, limited to where they could have rallies, and yet he lost in a landslide. So I think that's the hopeful side of it. But Democrats should use everything that they can to fight this battle.
Well, Julie, the headline in the New York Times talks about Democrats' desperation in the wake of that Virginia decision. And according to people who took part on the call or were briefed about it, they at one point discussed an unusual gambit to replace the entire state Supreme Court with a goal of reinstating the map. Now, even people on the call realized that was far-fetched, but does it give you sort of an insight into just how worried they are about where this could be going?
I don't think it's far-fetched, and I agree with Stuart entirely. I mean, look, Republicans have done everything possible that we used to think is far-fetched. They have rigged the system over and over and over and over again. Democrats lived by this mantra for a very long time. When they go low, we go high. I don't want to curse on air, so let me just say, forget that. I mean, forget it. Because what we need to do is when they go low, get out the excavator and go so low that they will have no choice.
Does that really benefit them, though? I mean,
does it benefit the country? Of course not. Does it benefit Democrats at a time when Republicans are asking Democrats to unilaterally disarm? Of course. So the bottom line is that Democrats need to do what it takes to eradicate this cancer, because that's what it is, eradicate it. And then when it makes sense to Republicans to finally understand that if they go down this road, Democrats are going to do the exact same thing to them. And so maybe they should not go down this road next time. Only then can we talk about what's best for the country. But right now, if Democrats have this attitude of, well, we're going to take the moral high ground, we're not going to do this, this is not the way it's supposed to be, that's what got us Donald Trump. That's what got us both houses of Congress in Republican hands. That's what got us the Supreme Court. And I can keep going towards legislatures and redistricting. We cannot afford to behave this way. So I would say that New York Times article, things that sound far-fetched should not sound far-fetched. They should do it. Let the chips fall where they may. They control the governor's mansion in Virginia right now. Impeach these justices. I don't even care anymore. Do what needs to be done to fulfill the will of the Virginia voters and get those seats back.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who feel that goes down a road that's very hard to come back from. But Stuart, Republican efforts are targeting a lot of minority-led districts. Could that backfire and cost them support among black voters, Latino voters, at a time when polls show that there had been a lot of progress in that party with voters? But now add to economic concerns. What does it mean if you say to those folks who jumped ship from Democrats and voted for you that you're trying to disenfranchise them?
Yeah, you know, I think the degree to which the 24 elections were realignment elections is grossly overstated. Republicans were celebrating because they only lost 88% of African Americans, because they only lost 60+% of Asian Americans. And I think it was a moment that existed. It was a change election. They had a very weird thing that happened in the Democratic Party. And that was not a realignment. So what's the test for that? Look at where people have voted in large numbers, Virginia and New Jersey. So the African-American Republican nominee for governor in Virginia got 7% of the African-American vote, which has been pretty much the norm. Goldwater got 7%. Now she's got 7%. And I think with Hispanics, you can't exist in two worlds where you're going to satisfy your MAGA base by having this army of, heavily armed masked thugs chasing brown people around the country and shooting people who protest in the face, and say that you're for Hispanics. It's not working, and it's not going to work. So look, Trump's coalition, when he won, in 20, when he lost, it was 85% white. When he won in 24, it was 84% white in a country that's becoming a majority country. And that ultimately is what's driving all of this. Republicans know that the country is becoming a majority country, and all the Stephen Millers in the world can't stop that. So they are desperate to curate the vote to fight this tide, which is a tragedy because they should be trying to appeal to these voters. But it's something we failed at as Republicans and continue to fail at even greater degree.
I wonder, Julie, if you think Democrats should be worried in the political sense and Americans maybe should be worried in the broader sense, democracy, about this election integrity army, as Trump calls it.
Sure, because what Trump is trying to do is exactly what Stuart said, curate the vote to benefit himself.
Right now, President Trump is on his way back, as you know, from a critical summit with Chinese President Xi. He is on Air Force One, making his way back to the United States. Speaking this morning on Air Force One, he made some eyebrow-raising statements, including a non-commitment on Taiwan arms sales that Congress has already approved to the tune of about $14 billion. He also talked about the Strait of Hormuz. How do you, the American people, feel about the president's handling of all these huge, important issues? And that is where CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton comes in. So just where is Donald Trump right now in the minds of Americans?
You know, we've had all of these big events that have been going on, and sometimes I think it's worth taking the 35,000 point view, right? That viewpoint from up in the sky, and we could just see it is you could see it here. You know, this is the aggregate of my aggregate of polling data that, you know, you're looking at here. And it's just a steady climb downward into the Red Sea because Trump's net approval rating hits a new low. You could see it right here, 20 points underwater. And what you just see on your screen right here is it's been a steady climb downward. You know, you go back to January of 2025. At the beginning it was +6, then -6 by May 2025, -9, -14, -15. But over the last few months, as the Iran war has taken shape, as those gas prices have jumped through the roof, Trump has hit a new low. He's at -20 points, which is the lowest point of his second term.
So you talk about this being an aggregate, so the average of what's happening. What about individual polling? What did you see?
Yeah, okay, so this is the average of polling. But I was just thinking, hey, have there been any polls recently in which Trump has not had a negative net approval rating like he does in the aggregate of polling? And you go back in time because this really just sort of takes the cakes. Trump's negative net approval rating, every poll since March 29, 2025, that is over a year ago. You can't find a single poll in which he has anything but a net negative approval rating. That is 413 days in a row. That is more than 365. It is more than a year. Trump has been underwater, not just in the aggregate, but every single poll.
There is one thing that people have noticed, and this happens sort of not as much in his last administration, that he's done a lot of things, from tariffs to the war in Iran. It's not like necessarily things people like, but there have been a lot of moves made by this president. Hasn't it helped him at all, or it has actually done the opposite?
Yeah, exactly right. It's done the exact opposite because you see this every single poll for over a year, 413 days. And you go to yourself, you know what the most important thing is when it comes to presidential politics? Pretty much all the time. It's the economy, Smarty, right over there. And you just look right at this and you say, the net effect on your personal finances. The best of the group is the tax law, right? That's 16 points underwater. How about tariffs? 49 points underwater. How about the Iran war? That effect on your finances? 67 points underwater. No wonder Trump is underwater in every single poll. No wonder he's hitting new lows in the aggregate. Because when it comes to the economy, the reason he won a second term, all of the signature pieces of either legislation or events, he is underwater by a ton. I mean, 67 points underwater. Whoosh.
Yeah, that's because people are paying $4.50 plus a gallon average. That's part of it. Gas prices are killing our budgets. The national average for gas has risen to $4.52 a gallon. That is $1.33 higher than it was last year at this time. You aren't the only one that's frustrated, it turns out, and worried. Gas station owners say they too are struggling with this. Joining me now is Chris Bambury, a gas station owner in Sonoma Valley, California. His family has been selling gas in the valley for more than 100 years. Pretty incredible. That is a very long time. So I got to ask you first, what are you charging for regular unleaded in California right now?
Oh, we're about $6.40 a gallon for regular unleaded.
Whew. All right. Your family has been in the gas business for more than 100 years. That means that you were around your family was around during the gas shortages of the Carter years. Give me a sense of what this gas spike now looks like for you, what it means.
The most volatile we've ever seen. So my father lived through that definitely, and was operating during the Carter years and the long lines and running out of product and a lot of challenges then. But this has been so volatile with the up and down. You really can't comprehend, where it's going to go. You're one day it's coming down, next day back up. So most volatility we've ever seen in
Wow.
my lifetime in the industry.
That's saying something for a family that's been through this for 100 years, and you've been around for a bit, just watching all this happen. Look, as
Yep.
drivers, when we pull up to the gas station, we tend to look at the prices and blame y'all a little bit and say, like, what are these gas stations, like, what are they doing charging this money? Do you benefit at all from high gas prices?
No, our industry fares worse, and we never like high gas prices. Customers really do not like the prices high. They come in, they're much more upset about where the market's at and how much it hurts their pocketbook. Our industry gets even more compressed and competitive when it's higher prices. Just really for the customers are looking around, shopping, and just it's a much tougher.
I think it's important not to underestimate the damage Republicans are trying to do through aggressive gerrymandering under Donald Trump. But at the same time, these efforts don't feel like the actions of a party that's confident about winning. They feel like the actions of a party operating from fear. The argument being made here is that Republicans are pushing these extreme redistricting strategies because they believe the political environment is turning against them. And what makes this stand out is that we didn't even see this level of desperation during previous election cycles when Republicans were also facing major headwinds. Back in 2016, Republicans had complete control of Washington after Trump's first victory. They held the presidency, the House, and the Senate all at once. Then by 2018, the political climate had shifted sharply against them. Polling looked terrible for Republicans heading into the midterms. They managed to hold on to the Senate, but Democrats won back the House by massive margins. Yet even in that environment, Republicans didn't launch the kind of mid-cycle redistricting efforts critics say they're attempting now. We didn't see the same push to aggressively redraw maps outside the traditional census timeline. The speaker argues that today's tactics go even further, especially regarding accusations that Republicans are trying to weaken the voting influence of African American and urban communities. Gerrymandering has existed in American politics for decades, but critics believe the current efforts are unusually aggressive because Republicans feel more politically threatened than before. And according to this perspective, they're doing it because they believe it may be one of the few remaining tools available to hold on to power. But there's also a major risk built into the strategy itself: the possibility of creating what analysts call a dummy mander. That happens when a party tries to maximize the number of districts it can potentially win by spreading its voters more thinly across multiple seats. The problem is that Republicans aren't creating new Republican voters. So to turn more blue or purple districts competitive, they have to weaken some of their already safe Republican districts by redistributing voters. That may help them gain additional seats in the short term, but it also makes formerly secure districts much more vulnerable if the political environment shifts hard against them. And that's why critics believe places like Texas and Florida could become much more dangerous for Republicans than party leaders expect. If a strong Democratic wave develops, those weakened Republican districts suddenly become prime targets for flips. So from this perspective, Republicans may actually be setting themselves up for larger losses by overextending their maps in an attempt to squeeze out more seats.